On Christmas night, 1776, George Washington loaded 2,400 starving, freezing soldiers into wooden boats and crossed the ice-choked Delaware River through a brutal blizzard. On the other side, over 1,000 Hessian mercenaries were sleeping off their holiday celebrations in Trenton, New Jersey. Within 90 minutes of Washington's surprise dawn attack, the battle was over. More than 900 prisoners were captured, and the Americans suffered 0 combat deaths. It was one of the most lopsided victories of the entire American Revolution. Yet this was not a lucky break by a desperate general rolling the dice. It was the opening move in a war strategy so unconventional and deliberately deceptive that the British Empire, the most dominant military force on the planet, never figured out how to counter it until it was far too late. When the Second Continental Congress handed Washington the job of commander-in-chief in 1775, it was a position few would envy. The Continental Army was a loose collection of local militias with no unified training, no standard equipment, and no reliable source of funding. Farmers, shopkeepers, and teenagers who had never fired a musket signed up for short enlistments, sometimes as little as 90 days. Meanwhile, Britain possessed the largest navy in the world, professional soldiers drilling since childhood, and a war chest deep enough to hire 30,000 German mercenaries. Early on, the numbers told the story. The Battle of Long Island in August 1776 was a catastrophe. British General William Howe outflanked the Americans and nearly trapped the entire army on Brooklyn Heights. The war almost ended that single afternoon. But under cover of a dense, unexpected fog, Washington organized a silent overnight evacuation, feeding 9,000 soldiers, their horses, and their artillery across the East River to Manhattan. The entire operation took 9 hours. The British sentries, positioned less than 600 yards away, never heard a thing. That retreat saved the Revolution, and it taught Washington a defining lesson. He could not beat the British in a straight fight on an open field, so he stopped trying. Instead, Washington adopted the Fabian Strategy, named after the Roman general Fabius Maximus, who defeated Hannibal by refusing to engage in pitched battles. Washington realized the Continental Army did not need to win grand victories, it simply needed to survive. Every day the war dragged on cost Britain millions of pounds, eroding political support back in Parliament. Time was Washington's greatest ally. The British had to win quickly, while Washington just had to not lose. Instead of charging into battle, Washington retreated across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. British generals mocked him, and loyalist newspapers called him a coward. Even his own men grew frustrated. But Washington was baiting the British into overextending. Confident the rebellion was collapsing, General Howe spread his forces into isolated outposts across New Jersey and returned to New York for the winter social season. This arrogance set the stage for the daring crossing of the Delaware on Christmas night. Despite 2 columns failing to cross due to the ice, Washington pressed forward with his remaining men. They marched 9 miles through a driving snowstorm, some barefoot, leaving bloody footprints on the frozen road. The surprise was total, and the Hessians were routed in under 2 hours. 1 week later, Washington pulled off another masterful deception. General Cornwallis marched south with 5,000 troops to crush the Americans at Trenton. Finding Washington camped behind a creek, Cornwallis decided to wait until morning to bag the old fox. Overnight, Washington ordered a small detachment to stoke the campfires and make loud digging noises, convincing the British they were fortifying their positions. Meanwhile, the actual army wrapped their cannon wheels in rags to muffle the sound and slipped away in the dark. By dawn, Cornwallis attacked an empty camp, while Washington had already marched 12 miles north to secure another sharp victory at Princeton. These wins revived the Revolution, but the fundamental math remained unchanged. The British still held the upper hand, and the winter of 1777 at Valley Forge brought unimaginable misery. 12,000 men endured 6 months of starvation, disease, and freezing conditions in crude huts. 2,000 soldiers died from typhus, dysentery, and exposure. Yet out of this suffering, the army transformed. Prussian officer Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben arrived and began relentlessly drilling the ragged troops. Standing in the mud, he taught them European battlefield discipline, proper bayonet usage, and coordinated volleys. The amateur militia that entered Valley Forge emerged as a professional fighting force. Simultaneously, Washington weaponized a secret operation in the shadows: espionage. He ran one of the most effective spy networks of the 18th century, the Culper Ring. Operating deep behind enemy lines in occupied New York City, ordinary citizens used numbered substitution ciphers and advanced invisible ink. A merchant named Robert Townsend gathered intelligence by socializing with British officers, while a woman named Anna Strong used her clothesline as a signal system to coordinate message drops. Washington did not just collect intelligence, he mastered disinformation. He planted forged letters and fake dispatches detailing phantom armies and non-existent supply orders, forcing the British to waste vast resources chasing illusions. The ultimate culmination of Washington's genius came in 1781 in Yorktown, Virginia. British General Cornwallis had marched his army onto a peninsula, waiting for naval resupply from New York. Recognizing a rare opportunity, Washington needed to move his army 350 miles south without alerting British General Henry Clinton in New York. To pull off this massive deception, Washington ordered the construction of a large fake camp in New Jersey, complete with massive brick bread ovens, and openly assembled boats along the shore as if preparing for an amphibious assault on Manhattan. Clinton swallowed the bait entirely, pulling his troops tight to defend New York. Meanwhile, Washington and a massive French force raced south undetected. By the time Clinton realized the ruse, Cornwallis was completely cut off by land, and French Admiral de Grasse had sealed the Chesapeake Bay by sea, defeating the British relief fleet. The resulting 3-week siege of Yorktown was brutal and relentless. Allied artillery bombarded the British defenses around the clock. Following a daring nighttime bayonet assault led by Alexander Hamilton to capture key defensive redoubts, Cornwallis attempted a desperate nighttime evacuation across the York River, but a sudden violent storm scattered his boats. On October 17, 1781, a lone British drummer boy signaled for a parley. 2 days later, over 7,000 British troops marched out to lay down their weapons. When the news reached London, the British Prime Minister paced his room in despair, declaring it was all over. Washington's total humiliation of the British Empire was the direct result of turning weakness into doctrine. He lost more battles than he won and lost major cities, but he understood that the war was about endurance, deception, and making the enemy pay too high a price to keep fighting. The British came to fight a conventional war, but Washington gave them a ghost who struck from the shadows, fed them lies they believed completely, and shattered an empire's hold on America forever.